Welcome to episode 5 of my Black Plague painting tutorials. In this episode I'm going to show you a quick and easy way that we can paint the Minotaur Abomination. I'm going to start off in the usual way by first washing and drying the miniature before applying the primer. For the Minotaur, I'm going to be using Army Painter's Skeleton Bone Primer. The first color I'm going to be using is Army Painter's Plate Mail Metal. The armor on the Minotaur is broken up into multiple pieces. One of the hardest parts about painting this miniature is figuring out where did the armor end and where did the flesh begin. The next color I'm going to be using is Citadel's Skavenblight Dinge. I'll be using this to paint the claws and the hooves of the Minotaur. You can probably see the large mold line that's on the Minotaur's claw. If you do notice something like this, you can always just let the paint dry on that spot and then cut it off later. While I was painting his claws, I noticed there was a bit of armor on his left hand that I had missed, so I went back and touched that up. And at this point we need to decide what color we're going to paint the spikes coming out of the Minotaur's arms. We could paint them all black, or paint them all to look like bone, but I've decided to make a mix of bone and steel spikes. The armor on the Minotaur's right arm has 5 spikes protruding from it. I've decided that I was going to add 5 silver spikes to the Minotaur's left arm as well, making it look like the tumors had overgrown them. So here's what our Minotaur looks like so far. For the next part, I'll be painting the inside of his mouth using a mix of Army Painter's Glistening Blood and Citadel's Ceremite White. Next, I'm going to use Citadel's Steel Legion Drab, and I'm going to paint the inside of the broken horn to make it look like bone marrow. And then using the same color, I'm going to paint the Minotaur's loincloth. The next color I'm going to use is Army Painter's Barbarian Flesh, and I'm going to paint the entire left arm of the Minotaur from the elbow down. Next, I'm going to use Army Painter's Brainmatter Beige, and I'm going to be painting all the bone areas of the Minotaur, starting with the large horn on top of his head. There's a lot of very fine detail in the Minotaur's horn, and for that reason I'm going to be using paints that are watered down more than normal. I'm also going to use the Brainmatter Beige to paint all the remaining spikes on the Minotaur's left arm. And the last thing we're going to do with the Brainmatter Beige is paint the Minotaur's teeth. For the chain around the Minotaur's waist, I'll be using Army Painter's Gunmetal. Next, we're going to start with the layering of colors on the horn. The first thing I'm going to do is use a very watered down Ushabti Bone, and I'm going to paint from the center of the horn all the way to the sharp tip. Next, I'm going to use Agrax Earthshade. I'm going to paint the exact same area again, but I'm going to go a little bit beyond it. My goal here is to slowly increase the darkness of the tone as we reach the tip of the horn. I'm also going to smooth the transition between the Brainmatter Beige and the Ushabti Bone. After a couple layers of the Agrax Earthshade, I'm then going to switch to Skavenblight Dinge. I'm going to paint the top 10% of the horn with this color. Once that dries, I'm going to switch to Citadel's Nuln Oil. Now I'm going to do the same thing I did with the Agrax Earthshade. I'm going to use the Nuln Oil to smooth the transition between the two adjacent colors. And this process takes a little while. You may have to switch back and forth between the Nuln Oil and the Agrax Earthshade. Just give each layer of wash you apply time to dry, and in the end you should have a really cool effect of the horn fading from bone white all the way up to black at the tip. We now have all of our main colors applied, and it's time to start the base. To start off, I'm going to completely cover the base with a 2-to-1 mix of Karak Stone to Steel Legion Drab. This is a large base, so I'm going to do something special with this one. I'm going to be creating a pattern on the floor of the base, and to do that I'm first going to trace the base onto a thin piece of cardboard. Next I'm going to trace a slightly smaller circle on the inside. To do that I'm just going to use the shot glass I've been using to hold my miniature while I painted it. And now I'm going to cut out 3/4 of this circle. Next I'm going to trace a very specific pattern on the floor, and once I've completed it I'll show you a close-up. So here you can see I've just created 3 curving arches, and this is going to be the beginning of a flagstone pattern that I'm going to create. So the first thing I'm going to do is create some evenly spaced squares within the arches. And once that's done, I'm going to use Citadel's Skavenblight Dinge and trace over all the lines we just drew. Once that's done, I'm just going to draw rows of bricks along each of the arches. My first stone is going to be a pentagon-shaped keystone where all three of the arches meet. And from there, I'll just draw row after row of brick curving along the arches. Once all of my bricks are done, I'm going to do something a little bit different. I'm going to add some flocking and some grass to the base once it's completed. So in preparation for that, I'm going to color in a few random bricks completely gray, and I'm also going to widen some of the cracks in between the bricks. If you don't want to add flocking to your base, you can just skip this step. Next, I'm going to start coloring in some of the bricks. I'm going to start with a pattern that we drew using the arches, and I'm going to color these in with Citadel's Ushabti Bone. Once that's complete, I'm just going to color in random stones using Brainmatter Beige and Zombie Skin by Army Painter. Now that we have all of our stones colored, I'm just going to finish off our base by painting around the edge with Dryad Bark by Citadel. Our miniature is now ready for shading effects, and for this I'm going to be using Army Painter's Quickshade. This miniature is extremely large, so I'm going to do the Quickshade in 2 stages, starting with his left arm. Anytime I'm using the Quickshade, I try to get it on and off as quickly as possible. I find you have about 6 minutes before the Quickshade is so sticky that your brush can't remove it anymore. So I start off by removing most of the excess with a large brush, and after that I'll switch to a smaller brush and just dab up the Quickshade in areas where it's pooling too heavily. Now you don't have to wait until the miniature is completely dry before you start the main body, but I'll give it at least half an hour so that the Quickshade is no longer moving around. You also want to make sure you have a nice smooth, even layer over the brick pattern you drew. And as you can see here, the Army Painter Quickshade has created a dramatic change in the look of our miniature. The next thing we want to do is apply a layer of matte varnish, and in my case I'll be using Army Painter's matte varnish. At this point you could call your miniature complete, but I'm going to add a few final touches to mine. I'm going to start off by highlighting the armor using Army Painter's Plate Mail Metal. The Quickshade has actually significantly dulled the shine of the armor. So if you are planning on doing some highlighting, this is a great place to start. So most of what I'm doing right now is tracing around the edges of each of the pieces of armor. I'm also going to use the paint to clean up the areas of the armor that receive too much of the Quickshade. Next, I'm going to highlight all the most raised surfaces of the metal armor by using Army Painter's Shining Silver. The next area I'm going to highlight are all the tumors on the Minotaur's left arm. I'm going to start off by using Army Painter's Barbarian Flesh. Next, I'm going to add an equal amount of Kislev Flesh into my Barbarian Flesh paint, and I'm going to add an even brighter layer of highlight on the most raised points. Next, I just want to brighten up the teeth by using another layer of Brainmatter Beige. For the bones protruding from the arm, I'm going to use an equal mix of Brainmatter Beige and Screaming Skull. And because these are highlights, my paints are really watered down, and I'm only going to add 1 to 2 layers, focusing mainly on the tips of the bone. I've decided against doing any highlighting on the flesh or the horn. There are a lot of small details, such as grooves and etches, that I feel will be completely smothered if we tried any highlighting on them. Next, we're going to paint the eye. I'm going to start off by painting the most raised part of the eye with Ceremite White. If you get a little bit of the white in a place you don't want it, it's nothing to worry about. We can easily touch up any of those mistakes using Karak Stone. Next, I'm going to use Citadel's Wash Fuegan Orange, and I'm going to dab it around the inside of the eye socket. Once we're done, it creates a nice reddish-orange hue around the eye. Next, I'm going to use Army Painter's Gunmetal just to clean up the area of the chain belt and also to return its metallic shine. To highlight the loincloth, I'm going to use an equal mix of Army Painter's Dirt Spatter and Citadel's Steel Legion Drab. I'm painting most of the loincloth with this, but leaving the Quickshade in the areas where it's creating either a shadow effect or it's filling in a deep crease. Next, I'm just going to highlight the most raised areas using a pure Steel Legion Drab. Next, I'm going to add some flocking to the base. My goal here is to try to create an abandoned courtyard kind of look. I'm I'm just going to be using regular white school glue for this, and I'm going to smear the glue onto all the wide cracks that I've created and the missing flagstones. Let the glue dry until it's completely clear, and then I'm going to seal in all of our new highlights and the flocking with another layer of matte varnish. The final step for painting this miniature is to add some blood effects. There's plenty of products out there you could use, such as Army Painter's Glistening Blood, but I'm going to be using Citadel's Blood for the Blood God. And here you can see our finished product. If you like this video, please subscribe, and thank you very much for watching.